So Brother Karott is a member of the congregation of the Little Brothers of Jesus, founded by Blessed Brother Charles de Foucauld. Brother Mani is presently the regional in charge of his congregation for India. He resides in a small village, Mailasandra, in the outskirts of Bangalore city, in the midst of people of different religions. The Little Brothers were founded by Blessed Charles de Foucauld. The Pope, in this encyclical, mentions some important figures towards the end of the document. He speaks about Martin Luther King. He mentions Desmond Tutu and Mahatma Gandhi. But what I found special is Pope makes a special mention of Blessed Charles de Foucauld. Brother Mani, who considers Brother Charles as his patron and protector, is the right person to speak to us and share with us on this universal brotherhood and universal sisterhood. Brother Mani is an animator, counselor, facilitator, and a retreat preacher. He was very closely associated with the National CRA and Vidya College. I'm extremely delighted to welcome and invite Brother Karott to address us. Brother Mani, welcome.
Time to start.
Am I audible? Shall I continue?
Brother, you can continue.
Okay, yeah. The theme that has been given to me is universal sisterhood and brotherhood, identification with the least as intense God experience, and a call to return to the roots of consecrated life. The two closing paragraphs of the encyclical Fratelli Tutti resume in brief strokes the intention of the Pope in writing this encyclical on fraternity and social friendship by citing the examples of persons who have inspired him: Saint Francis, Martin Luther King, Desmond Tutu, Mahatma Gandhi, and finally, Blessed Charles de Foucauld. He lays particular stress on the evangelical witness of Charles de Foucauld. Yet, I would like to, he says, to conclude by mentioning another person of deep faith who, drawing upon his intense experience of God, made a journey of transformation towards feeling a brother to all. I am speaking of Blessed Charles de Foucauld. Then he continues. Blessed Charles directed his ideal of total surrender to God towards an identification with the poor, abandoned in the depths of the African desert. In that setting, he expressed his desire to feel himself a brother to every human being and asked a friend to pray to God that I may truly be a brother to all. He wanted to be, in the end, the universal brother. Yet only by identifying with the least did he come at last to be the brother of all. May God inspire that dream in each one of us. Amen. That is the end of the quote. So, deep faith, intense experience of God, leading to a journey of transformation to become the brother of all, a universal brother, a brother to every human being by identifying himself with the least. These are the traits that the Pope highlights in the encyclical. This is the theme that I am going to comment on within the context of this webinar. First, I would like to explain the context in which Brother Charles lived and why he spoke of universal brotherhood. After his conversion at the age of 28, Charles de Foucauld became a Trappist monk and took the name of Brother Marie Alberic. He was for 7 years a monk in the monastery. He left it in order to follow a way of life closer to that of Jesus at Nazareth. Later, he was ordained, but he always called himself Brother Charles. There is a reason for it. There was a reason for it. He set up his first hermitage in Beniabes, an oasis on the border between Morocco and Algeria, a place of transit for all sorts of people. There were Arab traders, slave owners, slave traders, slaves, and French soldiers enforcing French occupation of the Sahara. It is in this context that he writes the following sentence in a letter to his cousin, Sister Mary the Bondi. I quote, "I want everyone here to see in me their brother, whether they are Christians, Muslims, Jews, or whatever, to see me as their brother, a universal brother. They have started calling my house the Fraternity, and that gives me great pleasure." Written on 7th Jan 1902. This attitude was in sharp contrast to the ethos of French authorities and even the missionaries of that period. He was adopted by the local population as their holy man, Marabout, an Arab word. After 4 years, on discovering that there were tribes living in the heart of the Sahara, where there was no Christian presence at all, he lived the last 14 years of life, sharing his life with the most abandoned, those far away, the sheep that are most lost. It is there, far away from any modern civilization, that he was assassinated by a plundering gang on December 1st, 1916. December 1st, 1916 will fall on next Tuesday. It will be 104 years since he was assassinated, when he was all alone in his hermitage. I would like to relate this desire of Brother Charles to identify himself as the brother of the least of our brothers and sisters in the heart of the African desert to a sermon on the Incarnation by the great Greek theologian Gregory Nazianzen, who lived in the 4th century AD. This is a quote, "This is what the great mystery of the Incarnation means for us. God became man and became poor for our sake. It was to raise up our flesh, to recover the divine image, to recreate mankind, let us say humankind, so that all of us might become one in Christ, who became perfectly one with us, who became perfectly one with us in everything. So we are no longer to be male and female, barbarian and Scythian, slave and free, distinctions deriving from the flesh, but are to bear within ourselves only the seal of God. by whom and for whom we were created. We are to be so formed and molded by him that we are recognized as belonging to his one family, as belonging to his one family. I emphasize it. And therefore, all humanity is only a family, God's family of brothers and sisters. What is the reason why Gregory Nazianzen and Brother Charles speak of universal brotherhood and sisterhood of humanity in this manner? It is because of their intense experience of God, of a God who comes down in order to deliver his people. In Exodus chapter 3, verse 7 to 8, God speaks to Moses, I have seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cry. I know their sufferings. I have come down to deliver them, to bring them up out of that land. Verse 10, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. I think this little passage defines, I would say, the goal of all religious life and is the benchmark of our commitment to religious life. This coming down of God even goes even deeper. It becomes an intense physical reality in the life of Jesus of Nazareth. He emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, being born in human likeness. In order to become our brother and to bring us out of our slavery. Brother Charles comments on this in his meditations. Jesus took the last place so utterly that no one has ever been able to take it away from him. From his meditation written in 1897. Why did Jesus live in Nazareth for 30 long years, sharing the ordinary life of the poor in the least reputed region of Palestine? Why did he apparently waste his time in Nazareth instead of spending it in spectacular gestures, saving people? It defies our logic. But this is the wisdom of God. Foolishness in the eyes of the world, but this is God's kenosis. This is God's coming down, sharing the lot of the least of humanity. This is the intense experience of God that the Pope is talking about. The foundational rationale of identifying ourselves with the least, because God did it in Christ Jesus, our brother, in order to recreate sisterhood and brotherhood on earth. This is the reason why Brother Charles wanted to be called Brother Charles. In another letter to his friend Louis Massignon, written 4 months before his assassination on December 1st, 1916, Brother Charles explicates his belief in the mystical link. This is something which I consider as very, very important. In the mystical link between the love of the least and the love of the sacrament of the Eucharist. There is no saying, he says in his writings, there is no saying in the gospel that made a deeper impression on me and more transformed my life than this one. Whatever you do to the least of my brothers and sisters, you do it to me. If you remember that these are the words of uncreated truth, says Brother Charles, and come from the same lips that said, this is my body, this is my blood, how compellingly we are moved to seek out Jesus and to love him in the least ones, the sinners, the poor. End of the quote. These convictions made him fight with the colonial authorities for the abolition of slavery in the Sahara. The slaves were treated like animals, bought and sold by their owners like cattle. The church authorities and the French military did not appreciate his attitude because he was upsetting the apple cart of the status quo. Brother Holdright spoke of, the status quo, is it not? And coming back to that, which facilitated colonization. I think this is something on which we in India, we religious, we need to reflect. When we think of the attitude we have towards authorities, even secular authorities. Facilitated colonization, and the Bishop of the Sahara was afraid that missionary activities would be affected by his extreme positions. I conclude with this, the first part of my sharing. I would like to go into the second part, which are challenges for us religious women and men in India today. In the light of these intuitions of the gospel, I would like to speak of a few consequences for our life as religious sisters and brothers today in the Indian context. The encyclical invites us to an examination of our conscience in order to discern our way forward. For this, I would like to use a word which could be misinterpreted, but since it is used in the Gospels about Jesus himself, I dare to use it in the word temptation. So I would like a little bit to analyze some of the pitfalls that we fall into in our religious life in India. First, the temptation of security. This pandemic of COVID-19 has exposed some of the pitfalls that mark our religious communities in India. Of course, it was a very difficult moment for us all. No doubt. I have experienced it from close quarters from my village in Mailasandra, where we have a fraternity of 3 brothers. It happened in the following manner. It's a little personal, but it is to highlight what I mean by this temptation of security. After the pandemic started, one day a group of women came to the house, led by a lady who was their obvious leader. Our families are hungry. We have no work and no money. Do you have rations for us? I was taken by surprise. I replied that I do not have the means to give them provisions. Later, I learned that they were migrants from the northern states and that they had no ration cards. So they could not get rations from the ration shop in the village. Next day, another group of women came with the same request. I could see that many of them were badly dressed, lean and hungry. Literally, what I'm saying is exactly what happened. Some of them in a stage of advanced pregnancy, and it is women who came. The men didn't come. It is the women who put food on the table. No, there is no table, the floor, in maybe very ordinary plates. This time I was jolted out of my security. I made a list of their names and I told them that I would get back to them. I launched a survey in and around the village with the help of some of my neighbors. I learned that we live very surrounded by people. We have a community, but which is in the village itself. I learned that there were more than 2,000 migrant families living in shacks all around the village. Those who were from the village had ration cards, and those from outside, like the migrants, had none. The ration shop gave no provisions for migrants, though the government officials denied this, saying that if they had Aadhaar card, they would be given rations. But it is not true. It was not true. The political parties as well distributed rations only to people who were publicly known as their vote bank. BJP to BJP people, Congress to Congress people, JD to JD people. Migrants were not in their agenda because they didn't have local votes. This is a fact. I was shaken out of my apathy. With the help of Jesuits, the diocesan disaster management, a group of Hindu friends, and other generous individuals who were very, very generous. I managed to reach out to nearly all the migrant families in the village till eventually many of them decided to return to their states of origin. It needed a lot of work to work within the community with people from different religions, because we have and who knew also all these areas. It was for me an extraordinary experience of openness to the people who live in and around the village, and to become aware of the poverty of the migrant population. I'm aware that our Christian communities did a lot of work to feed the hungry and provide shelter for the poor during this pandemic. This I'm conscious of. Then COVID-19 started to take away many lives all over the country. Here it is another story. We have 1,25,000 religious men and women in India, approximately. We have about 3,500 health centers run by the religious in India. Healthcare is one of the major ministries of the religious, and we are proud of it. But statistics give us a more realistic image. Only about 72 of the 3,500 healthcare institutions of the religious took part in caring for victims of the pandemic. This is quoted by Brother Varghese Tekanath in Indian Currents, October 2020 edition, page 23. This is in stark contrast to the attitude of our early Christian community when the Antonine plague struck the Roman Empire in 165 AD. Christians were a very small minority. The minority group called Christians risked their lives. I repeat the word, risked their lives to care for the victims of the plague, putting their lives in danger, even while facing adverse propaganda from the Roman authorities. Again, the same article, page 22. This is also in stark contrast to the situation of the healthcare personnel in the private sector and in the public sector. I have a niece and a nephew working in hospitals. Both of them had to be quarantined when they were infected due to their contact with patients. I was informed that this was the general situation in the health sector, despite all the precautions taken by the management. Many of our doctors and nurses died while working in the care of COVID patients. Of course, many also recovered, but they were at risk. They had no other option other than risking their lives, as it was also their means of earning as well, their butter and bread as well, which is very different from, I would say generally, the condition of religious. Meanwhile, we religious multiplied online masses, devotions, and prayers behind the security of our communities, within the boundaries of our institutions. We had a lot of valid reasons to do so, save the lives of the healthy members of our communities and protect those who were vulnerable. These are valid reasons. But this is the symptom that I am referring to when I spoke of the temptation of security. I think there's an element that we need to reflect. Why are we here for? Is it risking, or is it protecting our lives? Fidelity, I want to speak of another aspect of our religious life in this context. Fidelity to the sacrament of the Eucharist, without linking it to fidelity in serving Jesus in the sacrament of the divine presence in the least of our brothers and sisters who are suffering, is a temptation that plagues religious life in India. I am often surprised by the sort of fidelity we have to daily Eucharist, to prayers and all that, but without the component which Brother Charles spoke about of the connect between people, poor people, and the Eucharist. There is here an obvious disconnect between what we profess and what we practice. Risking to move into ministries that endanger our lives is something that we tend to avoid. Rani Marias and Stan Swamis are a rare breed in the horizon of religious life of brothers and sisters in India. Generally speaking, we prefer to stay within the security of the institutional ministries that we have established. I come to the second temptation. When I speak of all this, please don't think that I consider myself apart. I consider myself as part and parcel of this examination of conscience that I am doing for religious life. The second is the temptation of institutionalization. Correlated to this is the temptation of institutionalism in religious life in India and resultant isolation from the poor. I'm not saying that we do not need institutions. I'm not saying that. We do need them to incarnate our charisms in visible forms. But we have fallen into the trap of spending most of our energies in preserving and furthering the visibility of our institutions. We have dedicated the bulk of our religious members into positions of management. I hope I'm not saying something which is, prove me wrong, please. And employing others to work in roles that express directly the charism of our congregations. Foreign funds have dried up. So we need to generate funds for our upkeep and to preserve our institutions. We need money, that is true. I don't deny that. But the result is that in that process, we lose sight of the finality of our founding charisms, and we are transformed into efficient administrators of men, money, and materials. Do we not need to do some soul searching in this context as religious women and men? Are we at the service of the ideals of our founding charisms? I think it's a serious question that we need to ask ourselves. Have we renewed our ministries keeping in mind the signs of the times? The signs of the times. As Vatican II urges us in the document Renewal of Religious Life, the encyclical encourages us to do so at this juncture. Third, the temptation of efficiency without compassion. This brings me to the third temptation, that of efficiency without compassion, finally resulting in serving the elite, in excluding the least of our brothers and sisters. We need good results in our schools. If we want to survive and remain relevant, we need to become competitive in the health sector as corporates more and more are taking over these services, transforming them into education and health industry. As many of our institutions are dedicated to these two services with rising prices, we need finance and we need to generate income. How to find a balance? In finding ways to preserve a preferential option for the poor. This is a challenge to the religious women and men of Indian Church in the light of this encyclical on fraternity with the least of our brothers and sisters. The fourth temptation. I hope you are not too tired with my temptations. Yes. The temptation of community life without empathy. This is something dear to me because it is very much the heart of our encyclical. When talking of our life within our communities, there is another temptation, that of community life without empathy, without tenderness, I would say. That quality of love with tenderness. We live together under one roof with a superficial cordiality. But when it comes to serious matters, casteism, class, regional differences, ancestry, socio-economic status, and all sort of other prejudices block us in sharing deeply and sharing empathy with each other. What the Pope says about such barriers in society, preventing social friendship, is often what prevents charity within our own communities. We may not use the term enmity used by him, but certainly prejudices and antipathy cripple us in our mission. It affects our mission. People from outside who do not belong to our communities sense it without even our talking about it. The temptation of casteism raises its ugly head at decisive moments in the life of our communities. I would like to quote from the preamble of the Constitution of India to press home the message of this encyclical on fraternity and social friendship. It speaks of a solemn resolve to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, democratic, secular republic, and to secure for all its citizens justice, social, economic, and political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, equality of status and opportunity, and mark this word, to promote among the citizens fraternity, assuring dignity for the individual and unity and integrity of the nation. Our preamble and our constitution was promulgated on November 26, 1949. As we progress, India is moving far away from it. And you know very well what is happening, the political scenario today, exclusivism. But I see the connect, the sort of synchronicity between this encyclical and the sacred Constitution of India, of which we should be proud of. And as citizens of India, I think we should be committed as Indians, as religious of India and not of other countries, of India, to implement and to spend our energy to make sure that this great ideal can become real today. I would like to conclude my words by quoting from Fratelli Tutti. The church cannot and must not remain on the sidelines in the building of a better world. I think it is a very, very strong statement, which involves a constant attention to the common good and a concern for integral development. The church has a public role of charitable and educational activities. She works for the advancement of humanity and of universal fraternity. The church is a home. It's very important church is a home with open doors. A church that serves, that leaves home, and goes forth from its places of worship, from its sacristies, in order to accompany life, to sustain hope, to be the sign of unity, to build bridges, to break down walls, to sow seeds of reconciliation. Strong words from the Pope, but it is an official document of the church, and I think it invites us. I'm aware that in this talk, I have not suggested concrete remedial actions. I admit that this is the weakness of my presentation, but I have confidence that you, sisters and brothers who listen to me, to this talk, do have the resources and are better placed than myself to venture into that territory. Young people, young religious, said Paul Raj, and I totally agree with him. I smiled because, you know, I am on the side of those who are not so young. There is a reason why I say this. There is a diversity of charisms when we think of the number of religious congregations in our country. What is applicable here is not applicable there. We cannot make general rules for all, but one thing is clear. This dream of universal sisterhood and brotherhood is a common heritage bequeathed to us by the founding brothers and sisters, relevant for all times and for all peoples. It's an invitation renewed by the encyclical of the Pope. It requires men and women who dare to move out of our insulation and security into the heart of the masses of suffering humanity, particularly the least of our brothers and sisters. This is possible only if we enter into the experience of Jesus, who became one of us, one among us, as the last of all, as the servant of all. Only by identifying with the least did Charles de Foucauld come at last to be the brother of all. May God inspire that dream in each one of us. This dream can come true in our own lives if we dare to take seriously this call to universal sisterhood and brotherhood proposed to us by Pope Francis. I just want to make one remark. I know that the Pope has concluded the encyclical quoting only men. I think Mahatma Gandhi, Desmond Tutu, and I know that there has been some heart burning am I cut? Am I still there? Am I still there? Okay. But I think women should not feel excluded. It's an oversight, because in the church we have, in India itself, Rani Marias, we have Mother Teresa's, not just one Rani Maria, but many among our religious women. And I think that this little oversight should not prevent us from taking to heart this encyclical and moving forward, not afraid to take daring steps to make it real in our own lives today and tomorrow. Thank you for making me part of this webinar. I thank particularly Brother Paul Raj and the team which facilitated this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brother Mani. Let us put our hands together and then congratulate Brother Mani for.
Thank you. Thank you.
Brother Mani, stay on. There will be some questions you can come in and clarify.
Yeah.
I see a lot of best wishes and then congratulatory messages.
Okay.
I think you have said rightly about 4 temptations that you have highlighted. Temptation of security, temptation of institutionalization, temptation of efficiency without compassion, and temptation of community life without empathy. I see one very strong comment that the religious life is a dead horse in India that we beat up to bring it alive. That is one.
Can you repeat, please? Can you repeat?
Religious life is a dead horse that we beat up to bring it alive. All right. So, how do you respond to it?
You are asking me, Podraj?
Yes, yes, yeah.
I am not agreeing with this statement. There may be some aspects by which we could, say that. But when I look at the lives of religious that I have known, brothers, sisters, priests, and all that, I could say that, of course, we can discuss it. There is commitment. I think there is commitment already. The only danger I feel is that we're not been able to channelize that commitment for all the new coming religious and also bulk of religious into channels, into pathways, into opportunities that give the possibility of being at the service of the least of our sisters and brothers. In that sphere, there may be some cloud, non-clarity, but I would say that's my point of view. We cannot condemn in any way, opt on like that. Okay, we are not trying to revive a dead horse. I would say we are trying to renew a horse which could go a little faster with greater commitment. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think there are a few people responding also in the chat box that we need to wake up religious life today, wake up the religious. That is what probably someone who has been coming across many religious in India seems to be making an assessment. It is not a condemnatory assessment, but then it is a very good. Then are there any other questions? Are there any other questions? Yes, I don't see I don't see any questions. There are only appreciatory messages. Just hold on, Brother Mani. Hold on.
Okay.
Father Joe, would like to respond? You pressed a download or something.
Okay. No, I always admired very much both the brothers and little sisters of Jesus, and been an enthusiastic admirer of Charles de Foucauld. Very interesting life and what he went through. I remember in Rome too, your Little Sisters of the Poor was a group. It attracted many young people. Your simplicity and hospitality. I remember visiting your sister's place just over the Ganga in Varanasi. They are the only Catholic presence, and they told me all the rest are Hindus, but very nice how well integrated they are into this whole Hindu place. I think your whole lifestyle of doing simple jobs like the others, being among them, is a great witness to all of us, brother. It's great.
Okay, okay, Father Joe, thank you. Any other questions? The presentation calls for introspection, and definitely much change has to happen. So these are all affirmations. Introspective analysis was good by Brother Mani. Yes, Brother Mani, you don't see many questions coming in.
Okay.
Do you have anything more to share?
I have more or less said what I wanted to communicate, because that is the theme given to me. What I want before I leave, I have some other things to do, but what I want is to wish that those who are really participants of this seminar, and I am very happy to see Father Joe Manath in it, who is the secretary of the national CRI, there, and I think it's a very precious presence because, he is somebody who gives leadership to change of heart within the world of our religious. And I certainly pray and I certainly wish that this encyclical can really find an echo, because I feel when I read certain parts of the encyclical, I feel very moved. I should be honest with you. And that if in this direction we go, church will become relevant. We are a small community in India. We should not forget that. We are a minority. But this direction can make us really relevant. And I think it can give us a reason to live and to hope. And that's my feeling.
Okay, Brother Mani, there is one, I think, sorry, I forgot the congregation name. Sister Mary Tadavanal, I have met her. She is from, I think, Rajasthan or somewhere very far, Arunachal Pradesh. She is saying, thanks to Brother Mani, religious have no one to blame for not waking up to the world as Jesus Christ was. The fire of the Holy Spirit is missing in most of us. The challenge is to be faced by every one of us by going beyond the personal cravings. The challenge is to recognize their presence and give them farewell. Can Brother Mani enlighten us on this? Sister Mary Tadavanal, I think she's a Mother General of a particular congregation in the Northeast, Arunachal Pradesh.
MSMHC.
I see. Okay. I'm not a prophet. I want to tell you that. I am a little brother. And what I can say, I started my life as a little brother by working in the well as a well digger in Tamil Nadu, in a small village. And for more than nearly 2 years, I did that job because I wanted to live the life of the poor and experience it in the same country. I think Father Joe Manath spoke about little sisters and we brothers who do ordinary jobs and all that. So I did that. I went with, I was a member of this, I was supposed to become a Salesian, I want to tell you. And then in Tirupattur then I went to live in this small village. What I discovered was, I went to revolutionize the society. I went to save the world because I was very much inspired by Marxists. But what I discovered was that these very poor people from the village of Tamil Nadu, those very poor people with whom I lived, revealed the depth of the gospel to me. And I was converted. And I was jolted out of my ideas, in the sense I had everything in the head. I didn't have it in my heart. The gospel was not part of the marrow of my bones. And the poor revealed this to me. Now, I think that if we dare to risk our lives to go closer to the poor, I want really to share this feeling that the poor will reveal the gospel to us and give us renewal, give us reason to live with hope and with purpose. Because otherwise, what is the reason for religious life? Unless it is at the service of the society, it's at the service of not the elite, but the poor of our society. When we go into that world, I want to tell you, these Salesians are doing work with street children in Bangalore. Many other people are also doing. But when you enter to that world, you realize that there is an alternative India, the underbelly of India, which wants and which needs people like us. So I think that is my comment on that.
Okay, thank you, Brother Mani. Father Joe, anything you want to add?
No, I don't want to.
Yes.
Thank
yes,
you. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry.
Yes. Am I audible?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. See, in any organization, the main responsibility is with leadership. That means if I'm formator in a seminary, no use blaming the seminarians for being immature. They are young, they'll be mature. But they have a right to expect me to be mature. So leadership is the main responsibility. I think a good bit of what is called vocation promotion in India seems to me to find hands for work. We don't want to entrust jobs to lay people, so we just seem to be looking for hands for work. And therefore, one who joins soon finds out what is needed is the work. All these other things like Christ life and close to the poor and commitments don't seem to be real. The real thing seems to be get this job done, teach mathematics, do the accounts, things like that. So I think the leadership needs to be clear. If you recruit, for what? If you're religious, for what? I think that's leadership needs to be clear and set an example of this. This Pope is not only writing encyclicals, he has set an example. That's the point. He lived years in the slum among the poor. Even now leads a simple life. So to the degree that leadership inspires through example, like now this is a webinar will not change people. But if we see leaders living these things, having this open fraternity, then second point I want to say is, we in India are in this way privileged position. I remember a Salesian when we were students in Rome, a Salesian from Latin America telling me, he never thought of it. He said, you in India, most of your students and past pupils are people of other religions. He said, it has never occurred to me because Latin America, we assume that everybody is Catholic. So we have this daily contact in our schools with people of different faiths. So we are in a particular position to contribute this wealth of experience to the whole church. But one simple way to check is, if each of us can make a list of our 10 closest friends, very simple, ask yourself, who are my closest friends outside of immediate family? Just write down the names or initials of your 10 closest friends. That shows much about you. Ask, are they all from different places, different groups, different religions? Then you're a person of fraternity. Suppose they are all from your place or your jati or whatever you are, then all this nice talk is not real. That's what I want to say.